Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today I am doing a podcast type video. So YouTube have finally added podcasts to the equation and I am here for it. I have done these types of videos before and basically it means that you can treat them as a podcast. There's nothing to see, you don't need to watch, and you can multitask and go about your business, or pop me in an ear and not look at your phone. So I'm very much here for it because sometimes showing stuff just isn't relevant. I would only be flicking through decks for this conversation and I'm still feeling really rather dreadful. I have loads of hospital appointments coming up and some minor procedures. So yeah, this is how we're doing it today. I'm actually jumping in with a tag that I wasn't sure I would, purely because I think only several months ago max I did another tag called How Do You Do Tarot? Something like that. But I really enjoyed this hashtag 13 Real Tarot Questions by Mary Grace. And then when I went and reflected back on the previous tag, I realised there's only about 2 similar questions anyway. So I figured I would come back and I would do maybe my penultimate one for the year of how I read tarot, how I approach it, what I believe, etc. And then that can be me for the year or two until I revisit it again. So Mary Grace will be tagged below with her video, which is in 2 parts, and there are a host of other people who have joined in as well, and I highly recommend checking those out. But we are going to jump straight in, and the first question is, what is tarot to you? I'm just going to start off with my overall view because it kind of expresses how I think of it collectively, and then I'll go into my specifics. I feel like tarot is what we make of it, so what we put in and all that we believe, meaning that it can be different things for different people, and that's really the most vast description I can give. I see it as like a living, breathing and ever-evolving energy that is connected into this tool and system. So it acts as a collective one that then we each have our own relationship with, but the source is the same, So in that, it's what we've woven and continue to weave into it. At least that's my view. And then specifically for me, I see it as a magical and mundane tool. Magical being what's magic to me, because that's not always the same for everyone, and quite a lot of my magic is mundane to others. I see it as a collection of life's symbols, archetypes, collective energies and experiences. One of the obvious ways for me to understand tarot is also as a psychological, therapeutic and developmental tool, with like the somatic, emotive and intuitive layers align into the self, the soul, spirit and others. I feel like tarot has the ability to act as a mirror, reflecting, allowing me to dive into other layers of consciousness as a way to ask and explore the hard questions, engage directive communication, navigating life as a whole. And just, I think I said reflections and insight and encouraging change. But obviously with change requiring action and my continued engagement with a takeaway, it doesn't do it for us. I think it's great for emotional excavation as a whole as well, which I have likely said before. And when I say it's a communicational tool, also a storytelling one, just on a side note, I kind of see this as communication with ourselves, another, or spirit of any kind. In recent years, I consider it through a more animistic lens. So from the materials that went into creating them to the hands that they engage with, the spirit of that, as well as the spirits around. And I'm sure this will come up in later questions, but really, depending on my reason for coming to the cards and how I'm using them, it depends on how much of this I might tap into at any one time. So my framing, or the nuance of my framing, I suppose, changes based on need and desire and whether I'm reading for myself or others. Hopefully that makes sense. The next question is, do you read for yourself or for others? I've kind of mentioned this already. I have and do read for others. I returned to reading for others in recent months. Well, I say recent months, it's been a while now. Last year at some stage I returned, and my slots will be expanding very soon. How I approach this has changed though, which is something that I enjoy about these living practices, and how they ebb and flow with us. As I'm not anti how I used to read, it just doesn't really work for me at the moment. Perhaps it will again in the future, I don't know, although I do feel like I've really found a groove now. As a therapist, I wanted to utilise these skills as fully as I could without it obviously being a therapy session. But the live aspect, all I've trained to do with people in the moment, all of those skills, and written readings weren't really utilising that to its fullest degree. They weren't allowing me to have the in-the-moment conversation with a querent that I find so utterly conducive and inherently beneficial to the reading, because I really like the co-creation of a reading. So that's one of the many reasons that I do live video now. I do feel and witness the benefit of someone being able to engage with their reading as it happens and tailoring it to them as we go and really being with what comes through. So no avoidance either. I mean, perhaps there is after, but there's not during. And I do, of course, read for myself. If you've ever seen my channel even once, or my Instagram, or any of my, socials, then you know that I relish reading for myself. I returned to reading again in a time that it was very much needed, and at a time when people's approaches had really diversified in a way that I was ready to make my own practice and felt like I had more options and that there was just more information out there, and it wasn't necessarily a copy of what was handed down to me from those around me who had used it when I was younger. So I really love that. I find it an incredibly cathartic tool, and I really enjoy the creative layers as well. Question 3 is, with what frequency do you read tarot? It's hard to say. Firstly, because this asks about tarot specifically, which varies, because I use a lot of oracle as well, but I suppose I can speak to the specifics with tarot. Overall, though, of the two, I do have like a daily divinatory practice often, but I work with some of my tarot readings for weeks on end. So I'm working with the tarot daily or weekly, but the process of actually pulling cards and reading them while I, in one sitting is further apart, because I am working with the messages that I've taken or the goals that I've set. It's more of a actionable practice. It's not just something I sit, do, and then it's done. But I definitely read for myself monthly most of the time. It has been daily in the past, just when I was studying certain layers of tarot. And then in terms of like the frequency across my lifespan, because that seemed to be an aspect of the question as well, into my late teens and early 20s, I had huge breaks from tarot in particular. And when I used it when I was younger, before that, it wasn't daily. It was even further apart. But now, since returning, and I think I pegged it at around 2015, my practice remains my version of consistent. And like I said, that's easily monthly, even if it's just the monthly check-in from my year ahead spread presently. I feel like that answers the question enough. The next is, what types of readings do you do? There may be some repetition or like connecting of questions throughout these because I haven't prepped enough, at least. The type of readings that I do ranges. I have a monthly year ahead practice at the moment, but I don't work with them when I do the year ahead spread until their month comes up. I do enjoy spreads if there's a set purpose for them, and I make them often on Patreon to support people with the content we're exploring and focus for the month. But I just don't read spreads for myself with a high level of frequency aside from engaging with like the Patreon creations. I more often than not do like a freeform reading style. And I mean freeform in two ways. So I pull as many as I feel is relevant. And I also read them not necessarily in any particular order. So I might read them from left to right, but that's not often the case. I do like 3 cards or more, but will commonly add to my readings with Oracle, as I say. And with my readings, I feel like there's far more of my magical beliefs and craft involved in my private practice, whereas the readings I offer to others are a little more specific. It's not to say that's not a facet, but there are things that I will play with or undertake for myself that are just for me. But generally speaking, I approach it as specified in earlier questions. So like when reading for others, again, I'll still pull as many cards as is relevant to their session. I'm not making set spreads anymore for sessions. I'm not saying I would never use one, but essentially the way my sessions are is the person comes with the initial question or the focus, and we always start with like 2 to 3 to get the session going. And then we expand on this through the further nuances and insights that come out. And we will get into the question with more specifics, or we might slightly change direction depending on what comes through. And we'll pull more cards as we go. I don't tend to pull just one per question though. I do like 2 to play off of each other at least most of the time. So I suppose I would describe that as a tailored spread, but it's really quite fluid. And then of course, any of the types of readings that I do have my ethics and beliefs at the forefront of them. And I think that other people have discussed this, like they're going to vary from person to person. Regarding what types of things do you typically consult tarot? I would say that I consult tarot about most things, just not everything. I can give a few examples. If I'm too anxious about something, I personally won't, as I don't find it conducive for me historically. I don't consult the tarot about legal or health things for anyone. Perhaps a gentle outlook on like well-being. So that does come under the branch of health, but I don't do like predictive, finite, advice-based readings in those realms at all. There is a predictive element in the things that I do read on, because I like to explore potentials. Examples being like well-being, career development, relational facets of being a human, variables, the path ahead. These are all things that I typically will consult the tarot about. But really, I don't think I could say it better than Mary Grace. And she said, and I've written it down, I read on the mundane, the arcane, the sacred, and the profane. And I just loved this description, because whilst we might not always approach the tarot the exact same way, and perhaps sometimes we just might describe it differently as well, I really resonated with that. There's many more things that I do consult it on, and just a few things that I don't. So yeah, I think it's an incredibly empowering and cathartic tool used well, but I do feel that it can't support everything. In the same way, if I felt someone would be better served with therapy, I would recommend that instead, but not with me, as I don't give therapy to my card clients. The two things are completely separate. Obviously, there's a lot of skill crossover, but I do get asked by people who've had readings for me if I will be their therapist, and I won't. That's just one of my ethical boundaries. 6, how would I classify myself as a reader? And there's some examples here. So things like book meanings, experiential, figurative, literal, and then it says etc. Which I'm glad there are examples, because I don't know if I'd have answered the question in the same way otherwise. I am going to say that I'm an amalgamation of many things because of my therapeutic work and the varying ways that I have worked with and studied the tarot as well. So while not everything has resonated, much has, and those layers have kind of built into this intricative practice in the same way that I'm an intricative therapist. So that doesn't mean I specialise in everything or believe everything, but I don't prescribe to the fact that one approach solely fits all or feels expansive enough for me, and have sought to experience, experiment, and kind of learn as deeply as I can. But in terms of my main reading styles, I would say I'm very experiential, based on things like my storytelling and the infusion of the imagery and going beyond book meanings and the courses that I've taken. I can be literal, but it really depends. I'm a very present focused reader as well, which wasn't mentioned in the options, but it feels significant to me at least. And what I mean is there will be considerations and infusions from both the future and the past, but the present is where I like to reside in the most part. And then of course we go into the emotive explorations and the psychological aspects. So there is experiential and study-based book layers to that. And it's not always just been tarot books that have infused how I am as a reader, but the book reading alone has never been enough, because to me it is a practice. So I guess experiential is the main one. But it would be really interesting to hear how, clients have found me as a reader. That would be really interesting. Next is, what type of questions do I ask tarot? I feel like I've kind of now answered that already in the types of things that I consult the tarot on. I'm clearly grouping my answers. Well, maybe I should have prepped more. I don't know. I'm a bit foggy at the moment as well, so bear with me. Again, I will read for myself on most things, as I said, and will tailor this for clients to ensure that the ethical space is met and practiced. So it becomes more about how I ask the questions. And I would say how I ask the questions is through open questions and, open-ended, encouraging that explorative, communicative space. And actually, again, referencing Mary Grace, she mentioned redirecting and supporting clients in tailoring their questions to ensure that they're supportive, and I definitely do this as well. I am all for this, and it's interesting because I know not everyone is. Of course, it requires the client agreeing to it. I'm not forcing them, but they're sometimes framed in ways that I don't read. So again, that's part of that co-creative space where we ensure that it's something that, like I said, is going to be supportive and that I can read on or will read on rather. So let's just bounce into the next one, because perhaps that's a little bit more specific for me, which is, what questions do I never ask the tarot? And I've said this before, so I'll try and keep it brief. But before I go into it, I will say I support anyone's interest and exploration of whatever they want to ask the tarot, as long as they're in a healthy relationship with their practice when asking them. I personally don't ask about my health, life expectancy, or anything within those realms. I have chronic pain, various lifelong illnesses, and I'm disabled. So I do seek out the tarot for supportive insight into management of those. I explore how I'm feeling about those. I really get into it, aside from the predictive outcome-based questions, because they do not serve me there at all, and wholeheartedly would just add 2 layers of like health trauma that I have, or anxiety, or just potentially change the course of my actions and mental state in a way that's not necessarily for the better. So I have no interest in seeking out those readings either, but of course it's a very personal thing. Like I said, I don't ask for fixed predictions. Instead, I kind of stick to exploring variables and potentials. So there's no hard and fast one-shot future answer and that's it, because that's just not how I work. And similarly, on that vein, I don't ask many closed questions, but there are exceptions to that. So, for example, if I'm doing spirit communication, will definitely ask closed questions. But when I'm reading for myself or others, I tend to remain with open ones, conversational, like I said, and also ones that allow, bias to be realised and potentially stretch beyond where I'm at and not just feed into that. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I fully believe that we cannot make ourselves void of bias, even when reading for others, which I know people will debate, but that is, my mind is not going to be changed on that. It, for me, is about being aware of it and just not running with it. As humans, we have bias and assumptions and all of those things. As a therapist, I have all of those things still, but it is about having a conscious awareness and being able to be with it in a different way. So yeah. Next is, what do you think you are engaging with / speaking with when you read the tarot? This is a really interesting one, because this has changed for me over the years the most. For the most part, I would say the layers of myself and consciousness, meaning those less tapped into as well or uncovered, if it's working well anyway. For others, I feel like they would say that that's purely a psychological way of doing it, but for me it's far more than this, and I will always explain to people that psychology and psychotherapy has a lot of other layers to it. It is not just of the mind, otherwise there would not be somatic therapies, there would not be emotion-based focuses, and just a lot of other things. But for me, there is also a spirit element in this, and I have already said that my beliefs have adapted or returned to, depending on how you want to look at it, a more animistic view. So I do consider my decks to have an energy, and that we co-create in the readings. And spirit can go beyond the deck as well, because there's also the spirits around. I haven't really settled on more than this when I'm just reading for myself, like that's what I feel is involved. So right here, right now, I believe it to be a co-creation with all layers of my soul, consciousness, those intuitive layers that are less expressed perhaps in other moments, and the spirit of the deck or place, or both. Kind of like tapping into the web that's always around us and that we're connected to. And again, I'm going to use that word amalgamation, because I see it as an amalgamation because of all of those things, because the deck's voices vary. But then there's my voice, of course. So I could read tarot as tarot. I don't, but I could. And also what happens when decks echo each other. So they've each got their own voice, but then sometimes if I pull a deck and I don't know, haven't worked with the message yet, or haven't finished with the message yet, or I've just picked up another deck too soon, less often, but it happens, and then I pick up another deck and it kind of echoes the similar sentiments. For me, when that happens, it suggests that there has to be more than one thing at play when I'm engaging with my tarot decks. Just too many synchronicities. And I think synchronicities in themselves are a really interesting thing to explore, but I would be here for hours and probably would not do it justice. So next is, what other knowledge, experience do I apply to tarot readings? And again, the examples are things like astrology, numerology, psychology, myth, religion, etc. I wish I knew more about astrology. I don't. I know the basics of Mohan and a few other bits, but very much just expanding upon my beliefs of tarot. I include layers like psychotherapy and psychology because that is my training and my chosen career path originally, along with, like I said, the somatic, the meditative and the extended trainings from that. I also incorporate numerology and a lot of elemental layers. They are quite a significant foundation to my tarot basis, if you will. And then actually more in recent years, the myth and the folkloric interests that I have nowadays do definitely complement this. Also, one of the things that I thought of when I was listening to someone else's is I do actually work with colours as well, but not in a one-way method, one prescriptive way. You know, it's kind of my way of working with colour over the years. And of course the practice of storytelling, because to me that is an art as well and one that I enjoy. Question 11 is, tarot is the book of life. Where else in your world or life do you witness tarot? This is easy and it's going to be quick. Everywhere. Because to me, tarot is an expression of just that. The symbols and the energy are alive and thriving in nature and in the elements outside or in our homes, you know, countryside, city centre. For me, very similarly to the runes, I feel like we can find them in either very literal reminders, so like seeing the symbol or a very familiar photo or depiction of them, but also more than that in the energies and the experiences that we've attempted to embody and express in the 78 cards. So it's more to me that we've tried to put life into the cards, you know, we've tried to express that through the cards. So then of course it is out there living through the connections that we've made. And I suppose in that way it's just become another one of the lenses that I view the world through, because I feel it was the way that we tried to express the world's human experience. I'm not saying that's originally why they were created either, but certainly the way that the cards have developed and the expression of the 78 cards that we have now, it feels very much like an attempt at the human experience, trying to encapsulate that in its entirety, which is always going to be a challenge. But between all of the nuances and individualities that we each have, there is a lot that connects us and a lot that we share that is the same, again, in my opinion. Question 12 is, have I experienced where tarot has correctly predicted the future? Where did I feel it came to pass? I haven't done a hard and fast prediction, so I can't give an example of this. I can't give an example of, I asked if this would happen in a yes or no way. It said yes and then it happened, because I don't ask like that. But things are often reaffirmed or helpful. I have every faith the variables that I explore are significant, and I mean the explorations of the paths ahead, advice I've sought, everything else that I do with the tarot is supportive and, again, like, quote unquote successful. Otherwise I wouldn't bother. And that to me has always felt very empowering, despite the cards obviously not always offering something that I want to hear, see or even deal with. And I suppose kind of jumping a little into the next question and off of some previous ones, when I uncover something that is so damn synchronistic, I feel really like astounded, excited and engaged. I love when that happens. It leaves me feeling switched on and connected to the tool and its energy. So it's not like I don't get those experiences. I just can't answer that question in the way it's being asked, if that makes sense. But we are into question 13, and that is, if you are a witch or magical practitioner, which I am, how does tarot fit into your magical practice, if applicable? Tarot, I've already said, is how I commune with like deity and other spirits. And it's also a way that I expand on at least the more magical side of my animal gnosis working. I will say that oracle can be a really big part of this too. But tarot has been a part of ritual workings, journeying. It's been the focus or aid to some of my spellcraft in particular. So tarot is in there for sure. And that's not just during the craft, that's like a reading for it, how I might approach it as well. And it gets dirty, so to speak. You know, it's beneath the candle wax, it's bound to my poppet, it's outside with me and the trees and the animals, you know, doing our thing. It's there. The cards are just a huge part of my witchcraft in general because they are incredibly accessible to me. And there are some other aspects of the craft that really aren't, dependent on where my body, chronic pain and conditions are. So divination as a whole is a huge part of it. In all of its, like I said, magical and mundane layers, it is a huge part of my magical practice. And whilst that doesn't have to be the case, and there's many practitioners that don't use the tarot at all, I feel like it will continue to be an important one of mine because, like I say, it makes sense to my brain and my beliefs and my spirit, so to speak. You know, it really traverses those lines for me, whereas some things more sit in only analytical, they're only practical, and some things feel far more the other way. This has a real embodiment and emergence of it all that I just love, which is why I'm always here talking about tarot. So yeah, that's me. I can go and rest my brain now, perhaps for a few hours, but I really enjoyed that. I was feeling like I would do this tag in the end, so I jumped on, I did it. Those who are going to find it repetitive wouldn't have got to this point anyway, and to those who did, I hope it made sense. I hope you enjoyed listening, and if you jumped in on the tag, let me know. There's a good chance I've watched your video already, but just in case. And I will hopefully see you again soon. But like I said, I've got a lot of hospital stuff going on. There's a possibility you might not hear from me now until July, but we'll see. So thanks and see you soon.